Just a heads up, Mayor, we've got a lot of people coming in and out of this meeting, so there could be some long pauses for everybody, so just bear with us.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. I call the March 2nd, 2021 Bothell Regular City Council meeting to order. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge the remote meeting format. Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings is still in effect. Therefore, this meeting will be held entirely remotely. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Sign-up sheets were provided by the city clerk's office via the link in the agenda. The video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. If you have called in, we ask that you mute your device so as not to interfere with the meeting. If a participant fails to mute their device and causes a disruption, their connection will be terminated. For our phone-in callers during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they're referencing so everyone can follow along. At this point, we'll take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Deputy Mayor Zorn.
Here.
Councilmember Thompson.
Here.
Councilmember McCullough.
Here.
Councilmember McNeil.
Here.
Mayor Olson.
Here.
Councilmember Dorr. Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
All present with the exception of Councilmember Dorr.
Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some of our meeting guidelines. Speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If you're also streaming the live video, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. For our council members, if you wish to speak, please indicate by holding up the yellow card in the lower portion of your screen or use the raise hand feature, and I will call on you so this is to make sure that we don't have two council members speaking at the same time. All right, our first item on the meeting agenda tonight is meeting agenda approval. Any changes to tonight's agenda? Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Hazards of having a backdrop. Yeah, I would like to pull AB 21-28.
All right. Yeah, the approval of supplemental agreement number 8 with Jacobs Engineering for construction.
Right.
All right, I have that marked down. All right, seeing no others, we'll move on to public engagement opportunities. So we have a virtual chat with the police chief, March 4th at 7 p.m. Bring your questions and chat with your police department. Register to receive the Zoom link, and the details are at bothell.gov/calendar. And then we have serve on the Civil Service Commission, submit by March 8th. Learn more at bothell.gov/Civil Service Commission. All right, next we have proclamation. So this proclamation is for Hopelink. Whereas Hopelink began in Bothell, Washington in April 1971, when a group of laid-off workers responded to a devastating economic downturn by banding together to help the neighbors find jobs. And whereas in October of 1971, the group received a grant, took on the name North Shore Multi-Service Center, moved to Woodinville, opened a food bank, and also began offering rides. And whereas by 1984, the organization had expanded to cover most of East King County, opening centers in Kirkland, Snoqualmie Valley, Bellevue, and Redmond to provide food and emergency assistance, while also opening the first emergency shelter in North and East King County. And whereas in 1990, Hopelink became the first Medicaid transportation brokerage service servicing King County, and within 3 years had expanded to serve more than 25,000 people every year. And whereas the organization officially took on the name Hopelink in 2000. And whereas Hopelink expanded into North King County in 2006, opening its first emergency service center in Shoreline. Whereas Hopelink's first transportation hub opened in Kent in 2010, and 7 years later grew into a new and expanded facility in the same city. And whereas Hopelink currently serves 65,000 people every year, providing a network of services through 9 programs that help families, children, seniors, and people with disabilities gain stability and, when possible, exit poverty, as well as direct transportation services in King and Snohomish counties. Whereas Hopelink's vision of a community free of poverty includes a commitment to addressing systemic racism and the inequities and circumstances that drive poverty. And whereas for 50 years, Hopelink has served as not only a vital resource in our community, but a beacon of hope for our neighbors who are experiencing poverty and homelessness. Now, therefore, we, the mayors of Bellevue, Bothell, Carnation, Duval, Issaquah, Kenmore, Kent, Kirkland, Lake Forest Park, Mercer Island, North Bend, Redmond, Renton, Sammamish, Seattle, Shoreline, Skykomish, Snoqualmie, and Woodinville jointly proclaim April 21st, 2021 as Hopelink Day, and invite the communities to celebrate the organization we are proud to call our own as it continues its essential mission of helping people and changing lives for the better in our community. All right. Our next item, we have a APWA Accreditation Award. So I'll look for Acting Public Works Director Eddie Lowe and our Sustainability Coordinator Emily Warnock.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to introduce Dan Hartman, American Public Works Association Regional Director and Director of Public Works for the City of Golden, Colorado, who will be presenting tonight, as well as Tracy Quintana, Accreditation Manager with the American Public Works Association, who is in attendance. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Dan.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here. Normally, if this was a year ago, I would be there in person and have the opportunity to meet with you and meet with your staff. And it's unfortunate that we can't do that now, but at least I have the opportunity to talk to you about APWA, about accreditation, and about the accomplishments of your staff. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and this may be the end of your whole meeting. So well, okay, we're partly successful. I can't launch the PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. So, what is the American Public Works Association? And the American Public Works Association is an association of public works employees throughout North America, both in the US and Canada. We have about 30,000 members, and we provide education, certification, and voice. And when I talk about voice, I mean we try to educate representatives, either in Washington or the State House or your local city councils, about the importance of public works. And we also have credentialing for all aspects of public works. And one of our goals is, through credentialing, is to create public works as a career so that we can bring someone in as a frontline laborer, they get better, they do some studying, they become a certified supervisor, then they can move up and get a credential for certified manager. And it provides an opportunity for a career path. When I speak, I've asked crowds of public works peoples, how many of you have started out in life with when you get out of school with a thought that you want to have or be a public works professional? And I've only had one hand go up in years, and that person was lying. So the American Public Works Association works very hard to be a resource to public works organizations throughout the country. I'm going to use that. So for a moment, why is public works important, and why should you really be appreciative of the people that do public works for you? First of all, it provides all the needed infrastructure within your community. And you don't think about it much, but that infrastructure is critical to your day-to-day life. I don't know how many of you, when you brushed your teeth this morning, turned on the faucet, water came out, you threw up your hands and said, "Oh, thank you, that is so cool." But it takes a lot of people to make that happen. And they're dedicated to doing it. They're also first responders, and in that respect, you will think when I say first responders, police and fire. And as much as I love our fire department, when we have a blizzard here in Colorado and they need to get to some home on fire, if I haven't plowed the roads, and if there isn't water in that hydrant, they can respond all they want. That public works really is in the front lines of that. And the recent freeze down in Texas really points that out. When you start losing those facilities and the roads become impassable, grocery stores run out of food, people don't have water, it is very critical. So the last thing I will say, it is very critical for the vitality of your community. Having good roads, having sidewalks, trails, the types of infrastructure that is provided is important to your community. And I spent some time earlier today online looking at your community and reading about it. And you have a beautiful community. I've spent some time there in Mercer Island because we were studying what they did to the freeway. And it's a beautiful area. But you have a great town with a nice historic downtown, a great feel to it. And that vitality is tied to having roads, streetlights, sidewalks. So it is an important thing for your community. So this is, why would you bother pursuing accreditation? Because it's a lot of work. But through that process, you get better. Your department gets better, and taking on the challenge of doing it really is an opportunity to improve. And what I'll tell you is it starts with what's called self-assessment. And we have policies that, I don't know, 600, some of them, that if you provide that service, here are some things you should be thinking about and have something in place to address that. The accreditation process does not tell you how to do something. It just tells you you should be doing something. So it is very important, and it is, I think, a commitment to continuous improvement, and also it shows a commitment to excellence that your public works department, and I'm sure this is throughout your city, has made. So now I'm going to bore you with a few quotes. I'll tell you when you're done with them. First of all, this is from Vince Lombardi, and it really strikes home with me that the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to the commitment to excellence, regardless of their chosen field of endeavor. I think that's true for not people, but also organizations. And your organization has taken up that challenge, and I think they're much better for it. So here's the next one. And I put this in just because I love it. He's my favorite philosopher. But he says, if you don't know where you're going, you will wind up someplace else. And that's Yogi Berra. Well, accreditation helps you decide where you're going and helps clear a path that you will get there. So now there are 171 from all over North America, the US and Canada. 171 agencies that have taken up the challenge and become accredited. And I will tell you, Golden became accredited back in 2004, and we've gone through, I think, 4 reaccreditations, and it has made our organization better. That every 4 years, we have to go through all the things that we do and that we're obligated to do, and look at how we're doing. So it is important that we periodically step back, because in public works, just like I know you counselors, you have things in front of you, and it's hard to step back from the trees to see the forest. So what did it take to achieve accreditation? Well, there are 609 total practices, and these practices, again, are things you should be doing if you are providing a service. And Golden, and I think it's true with you, we don't have airports, so the airport section we don't do. But the practices that do apply, you have to go through and you have to document what you're doing. And again, not how you're doing it, just that you're doing it. So 411 applied to Bothell, and on December 7th, an evaluation team came by Hollywood Squares to do your evaluation. And that team had a representative from British Columbia, Nebraska, and Colorado. And these were the evaluators, and they would go through those practices. And I'm happy to tell you that you had full compliance, or your department had full compliance on 405 of those 411 practices, in substantial compliance on 6. And that is great work. But there was even a higher level of accomplishment. The process we look at, and the evaluators look at, and if you have a practice that they consider to be model that other agencies should look at and consider, we call those model practices, and they get called out. And your department had 7 model practices. And so it was through your code of ethics, your strategic plan, how the department deals with finance. And I can tell you from years of experience, there is always some friction between finance and public works. But planning and development and capital improvement, and that's important because it's looking down the road. It's trying to help you guide your future. The solid waste plan, the stormwater flood and water quality program, and potable water cross connections. And I know potable water cross connections is really exciting, and most people go out every morning and say, how are we doing on cross connections? But it is important. It's important to the quality of the water and the safety of your citizens. So very big congratulations on having 7 model practices. That is quite a few, and that's very good work. So it was a big task, and I know it's a big task, and I know it's hard. So this is the last quote I'm going to inflict you with, and it's from the movie A League of Their Own. And Tom Hanks, as his character says, it's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everybody would do it. It's the hard that makes it great. And I think that is part of what you and your department should think about is it was hard, but it makes you great. And you're clearly with accreditation in the league of very great operations. So that is very good. Oh, I went the wrong direction. So ruined my big finish. So congratulations from APWA, our board of directors, and their 30,000 members to Bothell Public Works Department, the director, Aaron Lonhart, and the accreditation manager, Jennifer Fry, and particularly to all the members of your department. A big congratulations, very well done. And I really thank you for allowing me to enjoy or join your council meeting for this presentation and inflict you with my silly quotes. So thank you very much. Congratulations. Job very well done. And I'll stop sharing.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for that presentation. I think there are some great and amazing numbers, just that there's only 171 of these accredited agencies throughout the nation. So, I mean, that really speaks to, the challenge of this and how hard it is and how great it makes it, so that this really is a accomplishment. I think you hear the other departments, our police department, I know they go through an accreditation and how challenging it is. So, it's great that we have another one of our departments within the city to reach that level, and our overall cities always is striving to be better. So, thank you, Dan, and congratulations to our public works department. And Aaron, yeah, please do.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tracy, for being here. It means so much to me that our agency is now accredited. And thank you, Mayor, for your kind words as well. I am so proud of this department. It was a Herculean effort. We resumed this again in 2016 under the leadership of Anita DeMahie Green, who's no longer here in the organization. But I wanted to express my appreciation for her getting us started back up again. And huge appreciation for the entire department. It required that everybody spend time looking at how we do things and how to do them better and documenting that, which is a big task for folks, and especially as the last year of this almost took place during COVID. So it was quite the challenge. And last but not least, an enormous debt of gratitude to Jennifer Fry. She's our lead admin assistant on our operations side, and she agreed to be the accreditation manager for this process and really demonstrated a fantastic ability to manage up as she herded us all towards the finish line, and we accomplished that. So just fantastic work from Jennifer. And if you don't mind, I'd like her to say a few words.
Hi, Dan, I wanted to let you know that I really appreciated your presentation. My favorite quote about Public Works is that we make normal happen. And I felt that a lot of the passion for public works that was in your presentation is felt not only by myself, but by the public works team as a whole. And I really appreciated it. Really hit home listening to everything that you have to say about that. I also wanted to express, I think on behalf of all of us, our gratitude to the APWA for creating the accreditation process, and to the evaluators who took the time to evaluate our practices and provide feedback. Having that process in place and the self-assessment framework in place really helps us be the best that we can be. And I know our team, like most public works professionals, are very passionate about doing the best that we can every day. And we do appreciate that that the APWA exists. Also, I appreciated what you had to say about the career path that the APWA can offer in terms of all of the training and other offerings that they have. And I would also like to recognize all of the City of Bothell staff members who participated. Most were from Public Works, but there were many from other departments as well. And just to acknowledge all of the hard work involved, that shows how proud we are of the work that we do here at the City of Bothell. And I think this achievement demonstrates that. So thanks to everyone.
One more thing I miss about virtual meetings is the lack of applause that you can do, because I think this would be a moment when everybody would be clapping and we would have that celebration. But yeah, this is a great accomplishment. Thank you. Thank everyone involved with this. So. All right. We will move. If I'm not seeing anyone else, if there was anyone else that wanted to say anything or speak, but if not, Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Just really fast. I don't take my water for granted. I don't necessarily think about it every morning, but I don't take my water for granted, and I don't take my clean streets or my clear drains for granted. And Lord only knows I don't take my flushing toilet for granted. So you guys are my unsung heroes. And I know I've said it before, and I don't know if I keep going on, it's going to sound, but I really do appreciate you, and you are my heroes. So thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
I just want to thank everybody involved in going through an accreditation is a tough process. There's only a few cities in the United States and Canada, since I assume if we have somebody evaluating us from BC, that they're involved too. My hats are off to you guys. Great job. Great job.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
And I think it's important to stress that this was a team effort, and that is a team award. So congratulations to all of you for your work. Thank you.
Councilmember Thompson.
That department really seems like it's got its act together. We should considering let whoever runs that run the city for a little while.
Sounds like a great idea.
That.
All right. Well, thank you. Fun little item to start off our night with. So we will move on to our next. So we have our legislative update with Kellye Mazzoli, our Assistant City Manager. Tough act to follow, but I know she's up to it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. While everybody's filtering off, I wanted to commend the Public Works Department, and it's so exciting that you achieved this accreditation. Very, very proud. Okay, with that, give me just a moment and I will share my council presentation. Okay. Can everybody see the presentation? Excellent. All right. Kellye Mazzoli, your Assistant City Manager here with your March 2nd, 2021 legislative update. We are in our 8th week of virtual legislative session down in Olympia. As you'll recall, we began in January and there's been about 1,100 bills introduced. So a significant number, a little less than normal since we're in a virtual format. But as of today, there's about 500 bills that are still alive. And what that means is that they've been approved by a policy and fiscal committee. They may be sitting in a rules committee right now waiting to go to chamber to be passed. The deadline to pass out of their chamber of origin is March 9th, 2021. So that's about 1 week away. And there are some bills also in that 500 that are necessary to implement the budget. And just as a reminder, there's no cutoff deadline for those particular bills. With that, I would like to highlight our legislative priorities. The primary one is the 405 toll revenue bonding bill that we've talked about before. And as you'll recall, we are opposing this one. It actually removes the authority to bond toll revenues, and it's quite concerning for the city. And it has started picking up some additional momentum, and this could potentially negatively affect our ability to get those north end improvements on 405 that we worked so hard for in prior legislative sessions. So I wanted to also make sure that you are aware that the forecasts that are coming out in relation to this are showing that there is a significant decline in the amount of toll collections, most likely because behaviors have changed with COVID. People are working from home and people are teleworking. So not as many people are using those toll lanes. And so this has a domino effect, but do know our lobbyist is working very diligently to keep up with this and to keep us apprised, and we'll be doing whatever we can to hopefully get somewhere okay with this particular legislation. So there's no additional information on our 2 other legislative priorities for this week. We hope that we will have an update for you, hopefully a positive one, next week. As far as bill monitoring goes, we have a few less. So on the support side, we had 11 bills that we were supporting previously over the prior weeks, and it's down now to 7. So 4 of those bills are considered, quote, dead. As far as oppose, we are up 1. So now we have 2 that we are opposing, and that one that we added was on utility liens. We're still monitoring about 34, and in all, whenever you add up all the ones that we were following in some form or fashion, there's about 27 of them that are no longer in the process. So on the bills that we support, I just wanted to remind you, you'll remember this list from one of your previous updates. And so it just shows you the ones that we're still in support of, and they're still progressing through the legislative process. And the 4 that are dead are listed there on the side. And you'll see a couple of those are related to local parks funding. And then we have a couple that are representatives here in our legislative district had proposed and are no longer moving forward this session. The 2 bills, as I said, and we've already gone over, are the toll revenue bonding bill that we're opposing, as well as House Bill 1421, which is related to utility service charges. There's been a number of different changes to this bill. As I understand it, this legislation has been proposed it's been around for about 4 years. And so we're just working to see if we can get that language. It was where we were supportive of it, and now it's reverted to some language that we oppose. So, but we're still working, and there's some amendments and different things that are happening with that one. So we're following that pretty closely. One of the bills that you'll recall that we had some concerns about was Senate Bill 5243. Just wanted to update you. That was for automatic engineering plan approval, that it is no longer in the process. Of the 34 bills that we're still monitoring very closely, there is that detailed list in your weekly report, along with links to easily access the bills if you're interested. About 14 of those 34 are law enforcement related, And there are about 10 that are around housing, affordable housing, or shelter. And then there's 10 more that are around various topics that may potentially affect the city, from carry-out bags to paid leave and some comprehensive planning and environment bills. And with that is my update, but the mayor has an update for you as well. We had some mid-session legislator meetings. So I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Olson.
Thank you, Kellye. So Deputy Mayor Zorns, Councilmember Thompson, and myself, we did meet with Senator Stanford and then Representatives Dewar and Kloba, where we spoke with them about some of the priorities that Kellye spoke about, most notably the Bothell Way widening and North Creek, and touching on the transportation and the utility legislation as kind of the 4 topics that we really wanted to discuss with them further. So they've heard these before, so this is really just reinforcing our support of it and just getting updates from them. So I think it was a quick but effective and useful touch with them. So I appreciate the time that they made for us, and as well as Deputy Mayor Zorns and Councilmember Thompson for taking the time to meet with me and the legislators. So.
Excellent. Well, that concludes my presentation. As always, I am, hopefully I can answer your questions that you may have.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Thank you, Kellye, for the presentation. I went through the update this afternoon, and there's a lot of work. I finally gave up and just printed it off so I could go through it and look at it. Is this something that the public could ask to look at if they wanted to dive deeper? Could they put your hands on that? Okay. Would they just contact you for that?
Absolutely. That would be great. Yeah. Okay. You can email me, or you can email the city clerk, and they will let me know, and we can get that to them.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I do have a quick question. There's 4 bills that are dead that interested us, correct? I'm trying to remember, could those in theory be revived next year, or do they have to start all over from ground zero?
I'm not 100% sure. I would have to check with our lobbyist on that one.
Okay. All right. That's all. I just wanted to say thank you. And if anybody wanted this, thank you for letting them know who they could contact.
All right. Seeing no other, thank you for your presentation, Kellye. Appreciate it as always.
Have a good evening.
All right, on to our council committee reports. Would anyone like to give a report on any of their committee work? Councilmember McAuliffe.
There we go. Thank you. I would just like to say that I did attend the Senior Center meeting, the NPRSA meeting on February 17th with Councilmember Tom Agnew, and he was chair. And we then reviewed their budget priorities, their work plan, and I'm very pleased to say that our assistant city manager, Kellye Mazzoli, she's the executive director for NPRSA, and she's keeping us well informed. So I don't know if Chair Agnew also would like to make some comments on that, but I was very pleased to attend.
Councilmember Agnew.
The one thing that I wanted to bring up is we all said it was a lot nicer working with the NPRSA now that we have money. So that made it a lot easier proposition for us to move forward. I thank Kellye. I thank Jennifer for helping set all that up. That committee has come a long way in the last few years. So, a lot of good coming out of it.
Thank you both. All right, on to visitor comments. So in keeping with Governor Jay Inslee's emergency Emergency Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all the city council members and are part of the record. City clerk, were there any, can you go through the comments? And I believe we also might have a call-in person today.
Thank you, Mayor Olson. Yes, we received 2 written comments. The first one from Andrew Nelson, who wrote in support of using youth data in terms of housing. And then Julie Rodwell, who thanked the fire department for the COVID vaccinations recently given at Boulevard Place. So those are the written. And then on for speaking tonight, we have Miss Ann Agard on the line. So Robin, if you could panel her in, that'd be great. I believe she's on a call-in. Give us just a minute here while we get her.
I just unmuted. I heard there was problems and you could not understand me last time. So I will be talking later on the critical areas ordinance. So I'm speaking now on the preliminary time. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay. Okay, I am asking that council, for council to provide some guidance or clarification on how the public can provide written comment prior to a public hearing, to a study session, or to an item listed on the agenda, so that that written comment can be included as an attachment to the agenda item when it is posted, which is usually 3 or 4 days prior to a council meeting. This past week, I sent an email on Thursday, February 24th, to David Boyd, Michael Ketterman, and to Laura Hathaway, as well as to all of you council members, with the subject clearly noted as the March 2nd council public hearing on the critical areas ordinance. And as I said, I sent identical copies to each one of you as council members. But the February 24th email was not included in the agenda packet, which became available Saturday evening. However, the attachment from the Department of Ecology was included, and it was dated February 22nd. So Monday morning, I again emailed David Boyd, Michael, and Laura, and again requested that my email to council on the critical areas ordinance be included in the an amended agenda for tonight, March 22nd. I have not received any comment to this request either. Therefore, I'm asking at this public comment opportunity for council to provide some guidance or clarification as to how the public can provide written comment prior to a hearing, study session, or an item on the agenda so that it is included as an attachment. Thank you.
Interim City Manager, would you have any insight to that, or is that something that we need to follow up on?
The clerk might, city clerk.
I can respond a little bit, but I'm going to actually have the city attorney respond to most of it. I did, Ms. Agard, I did send you a response today, and it was late in the afternoon, so I don't know if you saw that. And other than, I'm going to let City Attorney Paul Byrne speak to this.
Hello. Yeah, so as part of a public hearing, the only thing that we do is we make available, we post that the notice so that people know there's going to be a public hearing. And then we give the opportunity for people to comment either through writing or verbally at on the meeting night itself. There isn't any legal requirement that other citizens' comments that are provided in advance of the meeting be included in the packet as an attachment. if council, directs us to do that, we could make provisions for that. My concern is the timing of it. Usually the packet goes out on Thursdays. And so if any emails are sent on that Thursday, it does interfere or could interfere with staff's ability to timely get the packet out for public consumption and review. But there is no legal requirement to have those comments out there.
All right, thank you. All right, City Clerk, were there any more?
There were not, Mayor Olson.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak tonight? If so, please use the raise your hand function. Not. All right.
Thank you.
All right. So on to our consent agenda. So we did have one item pulled. There's my agenda. So we had AB 21-028, the approval of supplemental agreement number 8 with Jacobs Engineering for construction engineering of the non-motorized bridge at the park at Bothell Landing, pulled by Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Would you like me to address it?
If you would like to start off, yes.
Okay. Well, one is to first to thank staff, because this was a real heavy lift, both in getting the funds that were a little complicated, and then the whole staging and having to deal with COVID interruptions and just the process of putting it up. So a thank you for that. It's appreciated, and the city is just, I've heard nothing but good things about people's response to the functionality and the aesthetics of the bridge. So thank you for that. One is to clarify and make sure that we understand that this, what is it, about a $33,000 difference is because of the delay into 2021 and the fiscal accounting for that, and then the problems that COVID complicated with it going into place. So I wanted to make sure that I was clear on that, and then to ask for an explanation. I've had a couple of people ask me about the woody debris going in, and what we got in our agenda packet says that there's a lot of, they didn't just throw woody debris in there, that there was thought and planning for it, how deep it would go. So if someone could explain, just confirm why we're having to appropriate this extra funding, and give us a little backstory on the woody debris.
Good evening, council. And so regarding the woody debris, I wrote up something and I'll read it to you. During design and permitting, per the Muckleshoot tribe review of the U.S. Army Corps engineering permit, it was determined that the new bridge, being wider and also lower than the old bridge, would have potential negative shading impacts on the fish. And this warranted mitigation by placement of the large woody material or debris in the 3 locations. So that's one part of my answer, and the other part was during the initial installation of the woody debris material and the root wads, we did not achieve the ideal orientation due to the steep slopes along the bank of the river. and the permit only allowed for minimal earth disturbance. So to achieve optimum orientation of the wood, additional excavation would be required and modification of the associated permits. This required amendments to the permits to allow up to 30 cubic yards of excavation at each of the 3 locations. And that's my answer for the woody debris.
So the main function is to provide shade, I would assume. It's not a fast flowing river, so we're not really creating eddies for them to rest as much, are we? Or does it give them fish some shelter?
Yes, shade, habitat, shelter, resting spots, I believe. So
Okay.
this was typically they have every 50 feet or so in such projects for fish habitat. And this came about specifically because as a response to the Muckleshoot review of our Army Corps permit.
Well, it's a good problem to have because we improved that piece of the slough. So I have no complaints. I'm very appreciative of it. I do have one question more out of curiosity. I'm sure the woody debris will be a place for collecting sediment. Do we just let that happen, or are we going to monitor that over time?
So we have a commitment to monitor it over time for these 3 placements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your answer and your time on this, and I'm sure the community that's watching also appreciates it as well. And it gives us something to watch when we're standing on the bridge. So thank you. Mayor Olson, you had something that you wanted to.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I will be abstaining from the vote on this one just because Jacobs Engineering is my current employer. So I will just not weigh in on this topic.
Would you like us to move to approve this? How does the city attorney want us to go about approving the whole consent agenda since you have to abstain on this?
Yeah, so he's abstaining from the vote. He hasn't recused himself from the discussion. So he can still be the parliamentarian for the meeting and ask for a motion and then a second. And then this item would be passed separately. And then the consent agenda in its entirety would be passed by separate motion.
Perfect. Let's do that. Well, can I move to approve this AB 2128?
You can. Sorry.
Yes, you certainly can. Yeah. I'll just need a second. Councilmember McAuliffe.
Second.
All right. So we have a motion by Deputy Mayor Zorns to approve the contract supplement number 8 in substantially the same form as presented with Jacobs Engineering Inc. in the amount of $33,828 for construction engineering services for the non-motorized bridge at the park at Bothell Landing project, with a second by Councilmember McAuliffe. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none, we'll go to the city clerk.
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil? Was that a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Olson's abstaining. Councilmember Dorr is absent. Councilmember Agnew?
Yes.
Passes 5-0-1 with Councilmember Dorr absent. Mayor Olson abstained.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right. On to our consent agenda. Councilmember Agnew.
I move we pass the consent agenda as stipulated.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Second.
All right. So we have a motion by Councilmember Agnew to pass the consent agenda with the second by Councilmember Thompson. Any discussion? Seeing none. City Clerk.
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Mayor Olson,
Yes.
Councilmember Agnew,
Yes.
passes 6-0 with Councilmember Dorr absent.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, on to our next item. So we have public hearing, AB 21-029. I will open this public hearing for, it's a continuation of our public hearing and on the consideration of an ordinance amending critical area regulations. And I will turn it over to our Community Development Director, Michael Cotterman.
He's walking down the hall. Give me just a minute, please.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you, and members of the City Council. So tonight, as the Mayor mentioned, this is a continuation of the public hearing from the February 16th meeting. And tonight, we have Dave Boyd, the Senior Planner, who'll be doing just a brief summary of the presentation, the full presentation that you saw at the public hearing. We're not going to repeat all of that, but he's going to hit the highlights of that. And Dave is also going to introduce our consultant and some staff member from Department of Ecology that are here this evening to help answer any questions the council might have. We are asking you to this evening for action, if you're ready to take that action after the close of the public hearing and any discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and council members. I just have a very brief presentation, not so much hitting the highlights of the very thorough presentation that Amy Sumi of Shannon Wilson gave just 2 weeks ago, but basically providing myself with some talking points. So let me go ahead with that. Okay. Can you all see that screen? Okay, I'm not hearing any responses, so I'm going to go ahead.
We're good.
Okay. So as Director Cotterman mentioned, this is continued from February 16th. The objective of these code amendments are to update our wetland buffers. And this came from Department of Ecology comments back in 2019 when we brought some other code amendments related to, some other critical areas code amendments that didn't address the buffers, and Ecology commented that we did need to address that, either update our best available science analysis that justified the buffers that were different from the model code, or adopt the model code. So we hired Shannon Wilson as lead consultant along with Burke to do an analysis of that to determine what the impact of adopting the ecology buffers would be. And it showed that there was a negligible impact on building capacity. Some buffers increased a bit, some reduced a bit, and the net impact was minimal. There may, in fact, be significant impacts on individual properties, but overall, it didn't have a significant impact. We also are updating our compensatory mitigation provisions. We're proposing to do so to assure that any compensatory mitigation, which is when it's impacting a wetland buffer or wetland itself, is unavoidable, that the mitigation that is done provides the greatest ecological benefit. And that is a concept and a term that is used in Army Corps guidance and also in Department of Ecology, the updated guidance from Department of Ecology. And I would like to say that we do have tonight with us Amy Sumi of Shannon Wilson and also Nate Brown from the Department of Ecology, who are available to answer questions. And then the final part of this was some changes to improve the clarity, usability, and flexibility in the code. So the key elements of the recommendation are to use the Department of Ecology buffers and their best available science, which actually saved us considerable money in terms of developing our own best available science to deviate from those buffers. Like I said, the study showed no significant impact on the development capacity. And through this whole process, we've had significant review from Department of Ecology, really starting back in 2019 when we brought the previous recommendation to Council before having it deferred. And then in your packet, there was an email from Nate Brown that I received in time to include it in the packet before I sent it on for review. And then you've received the email from directly from Ann Agard, and when I received that, my focus was on getting response from our consultant and from Department of Ecology, and that resulted in the email that you received today, along with Ms. Agard's comment from Doug Gresham of Department of Ecology. So with that, I want to open it up for questions, and just for a little visual interest, I inserted this photograph of a beaver that we spotted up in the wetland in the Canyon Park area recently, and then open it up for questions from Council, followed by public testimony, and we're hoping for a vote and a motion and vote to adopt the recommended action. Thanks. I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, thank you, Dave. We'll go to Deputy Mayor Zorns first.
Yeah, I have two small points that I wanted to raise some questions on and observations on. But that is not at all reflecting on the total of this work. It's very impressive, and I know staff and consultants and Department of Ecology, Planning Commission, the community, it's a labor of love and great thoughts. So my questions are not to be disparaging at all at the sum total of this work. But we did have a community member raise, and I have been digesting it as well. On page 39 of the document, it would be page 137, about page 137 of our agenda packet. If we were to leave that language in, and this might be a question for Paul, if we were to leave that language in, would that have a significant conflict with the rest of the regulation language?
So this is something that I spoke to Deputy Mayor Zorns about a little bit earlier today. And my understanding is the language she's referring to is the language that requires mitigation within the same basin or the same area, as opposed to the recommended action, which is to allow the mitigation to occur in other places for the greatest environmental benefit. If Deputy Mayor Zorns wishes to make an amending motion at the appropriate time, and Council wishes to follow that, then what we would have to do is bring it back at a future hearing for passage with that amendment. We would just want to make sure, based on the volume and the size of the document, that if Council accepted those proposed changes, that everything would be then internally consistent with the remainder of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'm not thoroughly convinced that it needs to be removed, and I'm not interested in creating incubators for invasive weeds. So I just want to let you know that I'm trying to appreciate a balance here. I am concerned about the recharging and cooling and filtering of water for our own sub-area drainage basins. We have fish that don't get the move up to the next stream memo. They're depending on the health of our own streams and waterways. And in my mind, every bit of water helps, especially since a lot of our storm water is put in pipes and put lower downstream. Often it gets warmed up. So I am concerned that our first recourse has the language that compels us to look for other drainage subbasins to put this in there. So if you can point in the document that says go there first, I'm fine, but I could not find it. That's reflects on me, not on you. I just need to sleuth deeper. But if that language is not there saying to go to our own sub-basin areas first and describing that we do that, and I think that we have plenty of basins that can use extra help, I would like to keep the language in here. So for that reason, I'll be making an amending motion later on. I do have one other question, and then I'm done. On page 44 of this document, it would be page 142 of our agenda packet. There's a under preservation criteria, subpoint D, there's a piece that says it will not be degraded over time. Can you tell me how we monitor things that not being degraded over time? Do we just base that on somebody saying, hey, go check that out? Or do we have something in place that we make sure it's not degraded over time?
I'll take a shot at that to start with. Depends somewhat on the project, but depending on the degree of the impact, it can have a requirement that they submit annual reports, monitoring reports for 1, 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. These days, more often than not, it's for 10 years. So it's up to the applicant to have their qualified consultant submit those reports. Staff reviews those, and we use our third-party consultant to also help with that review.
Okay, thank you, Dave. That's very helpful, and I like the 10-year time span. Okay, that's the sum total of my questions. I'll yield the floor.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. And I have a question about one of the emails we received, and it's on page 97, and it's from Uppenter de Hinza, and it's regarding adding, he says, we fully support the changes and request that additional wetland areas such as Keller Farms and other similar areas be included in the planning process to help meet the growth needs. So I think when I talked to him, he said this allows for more options, but I just wanted to hear your response to that. Are they included now, or are they excluded, or is there a future to include them? How does this work?
So currently, and Keller Farms is a wetland mitigation bank near Redmond. And currently, it is possible to do compensatory mitigation, offsite mitigation, using that mitigation bank. But our current code creates a number of hurdles that an applicant needs to go to do that, even if that is, in fact, has the greatest ecological benefit. So this is an issue that our development review planners have dealt with. I wouldn't say often, but it does come up. And I think right now we're dealing with proposals and projects, maybe a half dozen to 10 projects, where the applicant's interested in using that option, and our current code makes it more difficult. So basically, an applicant coming in now that cannot avoid impacting a small, low quality wetland could propose to mitigate that impact on site and without going through any real analysis of what the benefit is. The proposed amendments would basically say that any mitigation needs to look at all of these options and then choose the one that provides the greatest ecological benefit.
Thank you. And I think finally I would like to show my appreciation to the many people who responded in our list to the Planning Commission and kind of gave their expertise to the Planning Commission and were really a part of this whole project. So I want to applaud their work and also the work of the Planning Commission. I think this has been a very interesting analysis and a very good benefit for all of us. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions. City Clerk, I believe there were some public comments made and I believe speakers as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Olson. We had 2 written comments received on this item. One from Ann Agard, who's also on the line to speak to this item tonight. So Ms. Agard wrote in support of the proposed changes and requested to retain the current ordinance language on compensatory mitigation. And then the second one we received was from Doug Gresham from the Department of Ecology, who wrote in support of the critical areas ordinance text that follows the hierarchy of mitigation preferences in the core final rule and the latest joint guidance. And council should have received those written comments today. And then on the line to speak, like I said, I have Ms. Agard. So if Robin, if you could panel Ms. Agard in, and Ms. Agard, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I support items A, B, and C referenced in the staff report for adoption by council to update the Bothell Critical Areas Ordinance. Adoption of the Washington State Department of Ecology model, the adoption of the update to references, and making the critical area regulations easier by removing redundancies. I do not support the revised compensatory mitigation measures in sections E, pages 35, 36, and 37. The section I request that you retain begins with the words, unless it is demonstrated that a higher level of ecological function will result from an alternate approach. There are 3 Growth Management Act requirements that are required for Bothell Critical Areas Ordinance and all amendments. Protect the function and values of critical areas, include a best available science, and give special consideration to conservation or protection measures necessary to preserve or enhance anadromous fisheries. For that reason, I support the current language in the code because requiring that the compensatory mitigation be done not on site, but if not on site in the same subbasin, most clearly gives special consideration to conservation or protection measures necessary to preserve or enhance anadromous fisheries. The same debate that you are hearing this evening is going on statewide in a net gain bill titled 1117, where this possible net gain could be done on a watershed level, which is very similar to what we are talking about either with the mitigation banks or fee in lieu or watershed scope versus subbasin. And there are wetland biologists on both sides of this argument who strongly support both sides, but certainly also support the preference for subbasins. My email referenced the link to the University of Washington 58-acre wetland in-kind on-site and restoration summary. This precedent-setting in-kind on-site mitigation included 6 acres of wetland impacts on the upland areas where the east access road and the buildings are located.
Thank you, Ms. Agard. Your time is up.
I will just finish my sentence. I am very familiar with the site. It is not in the shoreline management jurisdiction, and it did require compensatory mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the line, we have Whitney Negenbauer.
Hello.
Hello, Whitney. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. As was said, my name is Whitney Negebauer, and I live near West Hill Elementary in Bothell. Over the last several years, I've watched many 2, 3, 5, 10-acre home sites with small houses be redeveloped into modern developments. Since about 2016, I've followed and commented on the permitting process for many of these, including Ravens Ridge, Spring Ridge, and Hidden Creek, all along 88th Avenue Northeast, and also on 203rd, to name a few of these developments. One thing that really struck me was the ability for developers to be able to build by reducing a previously degraded wetland buffer in exchange for revegetation or restoration of that reduced and smaller area. This has allowed many more homes to be built in places near sensitive habitat. My comments to these proposed developments urge the city to not allow this practice. However, it was within the law to do so. I'm happy to hear that this rule will potentially change this as it does not follow the best available science. Past destruction of wetlands shouldn't be a license for future harm. I'd like to urge council tonight to adopt the strongest protections possible for critical areas and for these protections to be within Bothell, not mitigated elsewhere. One of the reasons that I enjoy living in Bothell is hearing the frogs at night and seeing the birds and wildlife right outside my window. Would be a shame to not protect valuable habitat within our own city and neighborhoods. Lastly, as was referenced in the previous speaker's comments, the stronger protections for the environment and land use are gaining support. There's a bill in the Washington State Legislature, House Bill 1117, which is working its way through the process virtually in Olympia and calls for a change in no net loss policies to a net ecological gain. So hopefully big changes are coming, and Bothell stands tonight well positioned to make positive changes to meet the objectives of fish and wildlife protection and even for recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all I have on my list, Mayor Olson.
All right, thank you. All right. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if we had anybody on the line that was willing to speak to what our last 2 public commenters said. Anybody with more expertise than me in this subject. And I don't know if that's appropriate for where we are right now, but I'd be curious to say what some of the experts we have to say in response to that.
I don't claim to be an expert, but I think both our consultant Amy Sumi and Department of Ecology's Nate Brown raised their hand and would be happy to speak to that.
Thank you.
Amy, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yes, so I think I would just start by saying that I think, as David mentioned, the existing regulations, which some are suggesting be retained, put basically a preference in place for on-site and in-kind, and would allow use of off-site mitigation only if on-site weren't feasible, and you go through a process of demonstrating that off-site would in that case be better. What the proposed regulations do is compel everyone to look at their particular project, what their impacts are, what the existing wetland is, and look at all of the available mitigation opportunities, and then pick the one that provides the greatest ecological benefit, basically at a landscape or a kind of a watershed or sub-watershed scale. It does not preclude anyone from doing an on-site or an in-kind mitigation strategy if in fact it can be demonstrated that that is the best thing from an ecological perspective. I asked David to share a little bit more about what was happening in the city, and he provided a couple of examples, and I don't have all the details, but that seemed like they would be very compelling cases potentially made going through the proposed regulations and resulting in an on-site in-kind strategy. I think speaking specifically to the anadromous fisheries question, the existing shoreline master program, which includes North Creek and Sammamish River and all of the associated wetlands that go along with that, that set of regulations does basically kind of put the thumb on the scale of preferring on-site in-kind. And I think that's where kind of the bulk, the greatest bang for your buck in terms of preserving and protecting wetlands that have a more direct connection and relationship to anadromous fish would come. That said, there are also projects within the city, and I think David shared a few of them with me, that are associated with non-shoreline but still anadromous fish-bearing streams. And they could also go through the same process, look through the same 5 criteria, and make their best case for that being the best ecological solution. And although there is emphasis in the Growth Management Act on protecting anadromous fish, I think they mean that at maybe an ESU or a population level and not a specific stream section. And it's my understanding that these larger scale mitigation banks, many of which are constructed at the confluence of important salmon-bearing streams that are tributary to the Sammamish River and are part of the Sammamish River population, provide extraordinary benefits from an anadromous fish perspective, in addition to their wetland benefits. So while there may be potentially some loss of cool water input from a small wetland project in Bothell, the gain that can be made at the population level to the species would be much greater if offset at the mitigation bank level. Let me see if there's a few other points.
Okay. Nate, did you want to weigh in, add to that?
Sure. While Amy is reviewing her notes, first of all, hats off to you for this important and hard work. It is not easy. And there has been a ton of work behind the scenes. I know just here at the Department of Ecology, we have spent a lot of time reviewing the proposal. The mitigation guidance document that's on the verge of being released has been in development now for several years. The only thing I would add to what Amy has pointed out is there's also a consistency measure here that we are trying to make sure that all of us recognize that we are part of a larger system. And so we have the Corps, the Army Corps of Engineers, Environmental Protection Agency, all of this language is consistent with their guidance and their direction. I would just stress that nothing here in this proposal prohibits mitigation from happening in Bothell. What we are trying very hard to get all jurisdictions to recognize is that an evaluation has to be made as to what the greatest ecological benefit would be across the board. Bothell is incredibly important, and there are important resources, but it is also part of a bigger system. And so we are strongly urging that people recognize how important you are in that larger system. And so that's why we are stressing not just a preference for within the jurisdiction, but as part of the entire system. So I just wanted to make sure that we added that 2 cents there.
Maybe one other thing to add to that too is just sort of on a practical level, applicants who are going through the City of Bothell's permitting process for a wetland fill are also going through Department of Ecology review and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permitting review. And I think I've mentioned in past meetings, maybe more with the Planning Commission, that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in particular takes an even stronger approach when it comes to actually preferring mitigation banks and in-lieu fee programs over all others. And so any applicant who has a mitigation proposal through the city is going to have their work cut out for them when they go in front of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers if they propose anything other than a mitigation bank or an in-lieu fee program. And that's where it'll be really helpful for that applicant to have already done their homework and have that really comprehensive analysis that shows that the on-site, in-kind, in Bothell solution is ecologically the best solution. Otherwise, I think you're just going to see there's going to be a lot of tension between applicants trying to get their city permit and then running into barriers either at Department of Ecology or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I've been in that situation myself, working on a project in the city of Sammamish on a road project. And even though we had great arguments for on-site in-kind, which was the solution we were proposing, and that particular city also was not interested in lieu fee or mitigation banking, we really had to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money trying to make that case that on-site was better. And in the end, we did prevail, but it was only because we had kind of gone through this same process that we've outlined in this code and had done all of our homework and had good arguments for why that solution was better. And there have been a number of instances I've heard where applicants who are kind of stuck with a city regulation that requires them to stay in the city and then going to the Corps or ecology, more to the Corps, I don't think this is an ecology issue, but they've had to do double mitigation and do on-site in-kind mitigation as well as pursue and purchase credits from a mitigation bank or in-lieu fee program because they just couldn't make the case to the satisfaction of the Army Corps of Engineers. And so they were mitigating twice, which is not a great circumstance for applicants.
Director Crotterman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add a little bit of perspective on why the staff is supporting this particular approach and the discussions that we had internally with DOE and with the Planning Commission regarding this. So just a little bit about our thinking behind this particular recommendation. I think you've heard a lot of the points already from our consultants and from DOE. When we started this process, as Dave mentioned, this came out of some amendments that we did back in 2019. And the direction from the council at that time was look at what DOE is asking us to do and determine whether that's the best course of action. So we had to rely on best available science. And in order to change the wetland buffers as we're proposing, we're relying on the Department of Ecology's best available science. So this is all part of that same package. What the experts are telling us is that the Corps of Engineers and the Department of Ecology are moving away from the system that we've used and most other jurisdictions have used for several years, because the science is showing that there may be greater benefit to looking at offsite mitigation as well. And so they're going more toward the opposite of where we've been. And what we're proposing this evening is really striking a balance between those two approaches, where we have the range of options available, and the applicants have to demonstrate to us and our experts that will review that work that that is providing the greatest ecological benefit, whether that's on site or nearby or some a mitigation bank somewhere. So it provides the staff with the greatest ability to really get the most benefit that we can from projects that come in and would require some compensatory mitigation. So that's the thinking behind the staff. We're relying on the experts that are telling us that the policy is going that way, the science is going that way. We're taking one step that provides better options and the ability for staff and for the environment to really benefit from this.
All right, thank you for those extra feedback. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you as well. And that was really interesting to hear, because the people that spoke tonight are people that serve on city boards that I personally enjoy, that are very involved in the community. And I want to make sure that we hear them and we address their concerns. So thank you, if you're still watching, which you probably are, for coming and speaking to us tonight. You know, the point that it's part of a bigger system and we are part of a bigger system really landed with me, because that's true with all of our biggest issues, like whether it be land use, transportation, housing. Yeah, thank you to everybody.
Amy, did you have?
Sorry, I was waving at a child.
Oh, okay. Councilmember McAuliffe. You're on mute.
I just want to compliment both Amy and Dan. That was a really good presentation. I basically really approve or support this balance you're talking about between what science is actually coming on with today. We see more and more information, and I really appreciate the work that you've done on this. I also, if you're still listening, from West Hill, I live on West Hill as well, and I do see the construction that's going on. But may I also comment that on West Hill, we have 200 acres of farmland that is preserved for the Farmland Preservation Act purchased the developmental rights. So we have a great value up there that we always will have a place for our animals and for the fish and the streams, and we're very fortunate to have that. So I just wanted to comment on that as well.
All right, looks like we've exhausted our discussion on this item. Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Yeah, before we move towards deciding what we're going to do with this, I just want to read what the language is that's being struck out. And on the top, if you look at the page on page 137 of your agenda packet, this is what is struck out. It says, unless it is demonstrated that a higher level of ecological functioning would result from an alternate approach, such as a mitigation bank, located within the watershed inventory of RIA 8, so that's the regional greater growth that we're talking about, right? Or a city Bothell sponsored fee in lieu program, compensatory mitigation for ecological functions shall be either in kind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the language that's being struck out has that provision that you can go elsewhere. but it has specifics on what we're looking for on making Bothell priority. So if you haven't looked, turn to page 137 and look at what's being struck out and make your decision from there.
Dave. Mr. Boyd.
I just wanted to make it also clear that we're not just taking that out, we're inserting new language that goes onto the preceding pages. So, and if we were to keep that language in, we would need to go back and revise all of that preceding language.
How would you need to revise it? Because it looked pretty consistent, just more specific.
Well, we would certainly have to take a close look at that because the new language was intended to replace the language that's being stricken. So we can't just put the stricken language out and then have contradictory code language. Even if the intent is the same, the practice would be different.
Amy, you looks like you were trying to make a comment.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I think it's a fine point, but the way I interpret this language and the way I understand it's implemented at the city is that applicants can propose on-site and in-kind and don't need to provide any other analysis of other options to demonstrate greater ecological benefit, unless for some reason they can't find an on-site solution and need to then go to an off-site location. So it kind of, I think it keeps everyone just sticking with, business as usual, on-site, in kind, without kind of compelling them to look more thoughtfully and broadly at the entire ecosystem and the other opportunities to see if that really is the best option. So I think that's the difference that I see there, is that it doesn't compel you to look outside of that smaller box.
Thank you both for those clarifications. All right. Amy, did you have a follow-up there?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that there are a few other places that we would need to revisit the language, not just keeping this section, but there's another section of the code, proposed amendments, that says that mitigation plans and mitigation approaches need to be consistent with ecology's joint guidance. And so retaining this language would be inconsistent with that joint guidance. And so we would need to come up with another way of saying that or remove that. So there's a few other spots that we would need to revisit and remove or change text.
Councilmember Agnew.
I was going to make a motion, but I see Councilmember Thompson has a question or something.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yeah, I just had one quick question. If we left this language in, like the deputy mayor is talking about, and then had to go and kind of edit and reword things, would it change anything about it, or would it just change wording? Like, it wouldn't change the fact that now we are compelling people to look for the best ecological option no matter where it is, rather than first do on site. Correct?
I guess we would have to look at the whole impact of making that change and how it would be processed. We'd want to go over that with our development review planners and just really understand how that would work. And that's why one reason I think that the city attorney said that such a change would require us to come back.
Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to make sure that I'm not sure if we answered Councilmember Thompson's question entirely. Are you asking what the difference is between leaving the language in and taking it out as far as what the mitigation benefit would be?
Correct. Like, what would the net effect be on the actual result of the policy? I mean, would we be changing something elsewhere that would be fundamentally changing the instruction the policy is giving, or would we be rewording it without really like changing what it means?
It would have an effect on how we process applications, as well as what the outcome of the compensatory mitigation would be. So the main difference between the two, as I understand it, is that currently we require, as the deputy mayor pointed out, unless otherwise determined, they first have to mitigate on site. So that's the default. In order to do something different, you have to prove that what you're going to do is better than on site.
Got it. And this would have the default be whatever is the greatest ecological benefit.
Correct. So they would have to go through and look at all of those mitigation options and provide evidence to us and our experts that would review that information about what the greatest ecological benefit is of each of those, of what they say is the best mitigation approach.
So if we left that language in, it would fundamentally change what it is that we're doing, correct?
It wouldn't fundamentally change what we're doing right now.
Oh, but it would fundamentally change the intent of this document and this.
Yes.
What we're discussing tonight. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
I move that we approve the proposed ordinance amending critical area regulations.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Thank you. I'm doing this for the community and city at large because their voice needs to be heard. So I would like to make an amending motion that we retain the original language of compensatory mitigation struck out on pages 39 and 40 of the critical area section regulation section F.
Deputy Mayor Zorns, I think that motion is not proper at this time because we haven't had a second to Councilmember Agnew's.
Okay.
If and when that motion is seconded, then it would be time for your.
I'll put it on repeat.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, City Attorney. Councilmember McAuliffe.
I'd second, please. I'll do a second.
All right. And then.
Sorry, for purposes of clarification, Councilmember McAuliffe, are you seconding Councilmember Agnew's motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So Deputy Mayor Zorns, if you'd like to make your amending motion at this time.
Okay. All right. I would like to make an amending motion that we retain the original language of compensatory mitigation that was struck out on pages 39 through 40 of critical area regulations section F.
And hearing no second to that motion fails.
Thank you, City Attorney. So we're back to the original motion made by Councilmember Agnew to approve the proposed ordinance amending critical area regulations and seconded by Councilmember McAuliffe. Any discussion on this item? So I'll just speak to it quickly that I really appreciate all the effort that has gone into this and the thorough explanation by multiple people here, by our hired experts and our staff as well. And I believe that how we're moving forward is looking at doing the mitigation that overall helps in the largest scheme, in the bigger scheme of things. So I think that was the intent of making this change in the first place, and it sounds like this is how the overall science is moving forward. So I'll be voting to approve this item here. Seeing no further discussion, City Clerk.
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil.
Yes.
Mayor Olson.
Yes.
Councilmember Agnew?
Yes.
Passes 5 to 1 with Councilmember Dorr absent and excused.
I think that was
Wait,
unanimous.
yeah.
One.
I'm sorry, did Councilmember Mayor, Deputy Mayor Zorns, did you say yes?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said no.
No.
So it passes 6 to 0.
I was like, who did I miss?
Yeah, I was having to replay it in my head. And it's like,
same.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and appreciate all of your deliberation on this.
Another reason why we need electronic voting. Sorry about that.
All right. Yes. Thank you all very much for all your time and effort and your presentations and discussion and deliberation tonight.
Thank you.
All right. On to, let's see, our AB 21-030, consideration of suspending the rules of recording for board and commission interviews. Hold on. So I'll be calling on our city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Olson. In the past, we've always suspended the recording for the board and commission interviews, which are coming up next week, March 9th. And we're just asking council tonight if you would still like to do that. Please note that, interviews will be virtual, and as always, the meeting will be open to the public. They always have been open to the public. It's just that this one's a little bit different because of it's being virtual. However, it will be broadcast, it will be open, and we're just asking if council still wants to suspend recording of this. And so I'm just asking for direction from the city council this evening.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes, I think we should suspend the rules and not record it. The people that are interviewing for boards and commissions, I don't see any reason why that needs to be forever on the internet.
Councilmember Agnew.
Agreed.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Are we doing an informal survey here? Or are we voting on it?
Just make a motion.
I make a motion that we suspend recording the boards and commissions interviews on March 9th. Is that right? Do I have the right?
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Mr. Mayor, my hand was raised.
Mr. McNeil. Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have a question. I think Laura had mentioned it's going to be virtual.
Correct.
Interviews.
Correct.
Will those virtual interviews actually be broadcast live, or just, or how is that going to work?
They actually would have to be, yes, in order for us to have the meeting open to the public. In the past, obviously, we have them in person, and the interviewees go into room 107, 108 to meet with the council. However, that does not preclude anybody who wishes to go into those interviews to go in and sit in the actual room, because it has to be open to the public. So because of the virtual meeting format, we have to broadcast it. That's just the way it is. But I'm just asking if we want to record it and have it out there forever and ever.
Gotcha. So, but if anybody wanted to virtually watch the interview, they could do that live?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So I believe, sorry for missing the hand, Councilmember. So we had a motion by Deputy Mayor Zorns to suspend the recording, and Councilmember McAuliffe.
Second.
All right, and a second by Councilmember McAuliffe. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none, over to City Clerk.
Thank you. Please say yes or no. I'll try to hear you when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil.
No?
Mayor Olson.
Yes.
Councilmember Agnew.
Yes.
Passes 5-1 with Councilmember Jor absent and Councilmember McNeil dissenting.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. Our next item here. So we have next item, AB 21-031, the discussion of the city manager salary range. And we will be having Human Resources Director Matthew Pruitt presenting on this.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation, so ignore the awkwardness for a second. Okay, so the purpose of our discussion this evening is to discuss the salary range for the city manager as part of our process to select, recruit, and select the next city manager. There's some questions that I hope to answer tonight and then discuss options with you. We're going to go over the purpose of the city manager salary range, why have that range be public, what our philosophy is about salaries in general at the city, how we determine comparable positions, how we establish a market average or median, and then what other city managers and comparable organizations are being paid, and then finally the options that we have for you. I don't believe there is a legislative decision that's needed with this item. We simply are looking for some discussion and some general consensus on moving forward. So the purpose of a city's manager salary range is to, number one, advertise it in the job announcement. Number two, once we have selected a city manager, have some negotiation parameters with that individual to negotiate a contract with. And number three, by making this process transparent, we're showing that we are in line with city practices and policies. Fairly so, the city manager's compensation is probably the most talked about compensation of any city employee at the city. But what my presentation shows and what the message we're trying to get out is that really how we determine the compensation of that individual is in line with how we do it for any other position at the city. So some of you might ask why we would post a salary range for the city manager position as part of the selection process. This is the best practice in local government. I don't know any jurisdiction that doesn't post salaries for their executive positions when they're recruiting for them. It is one of the first things that job candidates look for according to research. It saves time. There's less questions to answer about financial compensation if the information's in the job announcement. We're a public sector organization, so most candidates can find out anyway by doing some simple research on our website. So why hide it? It must the candidates know that we're serious about transparency and we're trying to provide equitable information about our jobs to all candidates regardless of background. Also, for reasons that I'll explain later in the presentation, I believe the city of Bothell is competitive in the job market, and posting the salary range can encourage strong and dedicated applicants. And this is also becoming a normal process both in the public and private job sectors. It hasn't always been that way. Usually it has been that the public sector posts jobs salary ranges and private sectors is not, but you're more and more seeing that change in the private sector as well for the reasons that I've stated. So this slide kind of goes over what our philosophy is about salaries at the city. The first thing that I would have you notice on the slide is the green line, which is representative of a market average or median. You might be asking why average or median, why not one or the other? It depends on the position and it depends on the data that we have. So if we have lots of data from comparable positions for a job that we're trying to assign a salary range for, and it's kind of all over the place, we might use the median because it tends to smooth out the bumps in regards to data that is sort of out of whack. In other positions, we might decide to use a market average. The other lines you see on the slide are sort of the top of market and bottom of the market. And at the city, we consider that 5% from the median or market average. And so you kind of see a middle there and then the top of the range and the bottom of the range. And then those blue lines are that's generally where we try to land. So at the city, we like to be at or just above the market. We try to not be below it, but we definitely want to be within those two lines regardless. And the reason for that is that we want to be competitive. We want to recruit good candidates from the job market. We want to be fair to our employees and treat them well, and also ensure that they're making a fair wage for the positions that they're in, the work that they're performing. We want to ensure internal equity in the organization, which simply means that jobs based upon their responsibilities, their requirements, other factors are paid fairly compared to other jobs within the organization. And then of course, given our current challenges with the budget and other related situations, we want to be fiscally responsible. So you've seen this slide several times. The purpose on mostly you've seen it when we've been talking about labor negotiations and how we establish what a comparable organization is. I'm simply showing it again to you tonight to sort of reiterate. We use this process for the city manager and every other position at the city. Essentially, an organization or a municipality is comparable if they are 50 to 100% of the city of Bothell in two of the following three categories. And the categories are population, sales tax, and evaluation. We generally like to look at organizations and other positions that are within Kings, Snohomish, and Pierce County. And we hope to be in range of the I-5 corridor. And the reason we have these criteria to determine what a comparable organization is generally it's best practice within local government. It helps, especially with labor contracts, if there's disagreements with why an organization may be comparable or not. So when we applied that process and we looked at city manager salaries, this is what it showed. There's a slight difference between what is in your packet and what I put in the slideshow. And that slight difference is that I added Bothell into the list of comparable cities. And the reason that I wanted to do that is I wanted to make the point that we are essentially at the median for city manager salaries. We are the middle. We are right smack dab between the six other cities that are comparable to us and have this position in the market. The other point I would make is that why are we looking at top of the range or a flat rate? That's because different cities do it different ways, and we're doing our best to make an apples to apples comparison. The other thing I would point out is there are other factors in the compensation for a city manager: benefits, car allowance, deferred compensation, other things that may be negotiated into an executive contract. I'm not providing you a lot of information about those things tonight. Those things we will discuss those things more when we get closer to selecting a candidate and negotiating a contract. But in generally amongst these 7 cities, there's not a lot of difference in those things. So it's pretty similar across the board. There's some small differences, but generally things are pretty equal in regards to those areas. So the discussion with this slide shows is 4 different options for you. We have outlined 4 different ranges within our non-representative salary table at the city. Ranges 53 to 56. The numbers may look a tiny bit different than the numbers that I put into the packet. And the reason for that is because the HR director made an error. We recently transitioned to a new payroll system, and our tables are actually slightly to the benefit of the employee different than our old tables. And so this reflects the tables as they are in the new payroll system. So the discussion item here for you tonight is, what does the council want to establish this as the salary range for the city manager position? And staff's recommendation is that we grade 55 the non-represented salary table, which is approximately $172,000 a year to $219,000 annually. And the reason that I'm making this recommendation is that it's in line with the policies and the practices that I've outlined in the presentation. And with that, I can take your questions. I'll stop sharing because I can't see them.
Does anyone have any questions? Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Well, I appreciate showing where our previous city manager fell within her peers. That was helpful information. If these are just hypothetical questions, I'm not invested in them, but I'm just trying to get some information. Measurable goals, are those something that we can write into the contract to provide incentives?
That's a great question, council member. I don't know that I've ever seen that into an executive contract. The way that I would potentially handle that is sort of as an addendum. So each year, you know, as we bring the new city manager on board, I think one of the things we need to discuss is what the performance evaluation process of that individual is going to be based upon their preferences and your preferences. One way I see that you could potentially do that would be to have an addendum to the contract that could be changed annually, that could update goals. And so that's a possibility. But to be honest with you, I've never thought about that question in that way before. And I'd like to look in to see what other cities are doing. I think that's interesting.
No, I appreciate you talking about, you know, giving ourselves some flexibility year to year. I think, well, I won't speak for all of council, but I would anticipate that would be a real welcome piece. Of the salary ranges that you presented tonight, do any of those, including the lower range, do any of those fall below any other executive employee wages?
So there's a potential for that. I don't think it's likely because depending on, we haven't got to the part where we're talking about what we're looking for in the next city manager yet. But once we do that, I find it unlikely that you're going to get a candidate where we're going to be negotiating at the bottom of the range. You're going to be negotiating at the middle. So the chances of that is probably pretty low. There is some potential, and this does happen at times, that the city manager could make, if you were negotiating at the bottom of the range, could make less than department heads from our biggest departments, not all department heads, but our biggest departments. I don't find that scenario likely, but it is possible. That being said, city managers are historically compensated in other ways outside of the salary, which is another conversation we'll have when we get closer to negotiating a contract.
Well, I tell you, I want the salary to be enticing people with experience who can come in. I mean, no offense to people straight out of school, but Bothell really needs somebody who's had some city manager experience. So I don't want to go to the bottom of the pay scale, because that means probably fewer applicants, people who would be interested. However, I do wonder if we went lower in the pay scale, would that allow us more flexibility to create incentives to, you know, have a good job performance? That's just a question that
that will be, so we will have that will be a balancing act. Well, I mean, this is a very great question, because that will be the kind of discussion we're having at the end here. When we have a selected candidate and we know how many years of experience they have, and we know what they made in their last position, we'll have those kinds of discussions about, well, where do we want to put this on the range? And that generally is any position at the city. That's a discussion that we don't want to put them right at the top right away, because then that incentive to, put them higher is
burdensome.
Not as much there. I will say though that because we have a salary range for a position, it does not mean that the salary range is put in the contract as contractual. And that has historically not been the case at the city. We don't put a salary range in the city manager's contract. We put a flat rate. And so there's ways to work around that if that scenario produced itself that we would have to talk about at the time.
Okay. Well, I'm going to yield the floor to the rest of council. I just want to say thank you, Matt. So far, you have not disappointed. You've set a high bar for yourself here for Bothell, and I know you're a human being, and there's room for error, but I just thank you for all that you've brought to the city, including this piece.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. It's funny, my natural instinct is to be a cheapskate here. And I'm like, oh, why do we have to pay more? And then I'm like, we're talking about like $4,000 between the next range down and the next range up. And like, I think it's okay to be a couple percent higher. And I had a question that I'm not sure if it's appropriate for this discussion or a future discussion. I didn't love a pay raise being tied to a performance review. I felt that kind of made things inherently awkward in the performance review. Is that a conversation we should have now, or is that a conversation we should have in the future?
Well, it's that we will have to have the conversation in the future. And so I would kind of piggyback on some of the comments I made in regards to Councilmember Zorn's question. And I said that one option is that we don't include the range in the contract, so we're not constricted by a range. We include a flat rate. One of the pros of actually putting a range in the contract is for the reason that you just said. In the sense, does that make sense?
Yeah, you cap the salary essentially.
Correct. So, and that is the method we use for all other positions at the city, including our executive positions. Like, we do have other positions that have executive contracts, and it's mostly our department heads and a few of our deputy chiefs and public safety. And they basically are tied to a range. And once you get to the top of the range, there's a discussion about what happens once you get to the top of the range. And then so those various variables enter that discussion, and that's all that stuff we'll have to do once we get to the point of negotiating a contract with whoever the selected candidate is.
Okay.
And you guys will be have to be involved in that.
Yeah. No, I mean, the range looks good in terms of what we're discussing tonight. Like that seems reasonable. That seems normal. I don't feel the need to go too much higher. Like, there's not a lot of these jobs available. Like, it's not like you can go down to the, to the Bothell down the street and get another city manager job. There's only a certain amount of us. So yeah, no, it looks good on my end. Thank you.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Sorry, there it is. Okay, thank you. And I went through your agenda bill that you kind of outlined where we would be in the range. And what I really care about the most is that we attract the very best candidates. We have some real challenges in Bothell, and we want someone who will come in and really help us to solve our problems that we've got, which is, our budget issue. There's quite a few things in the that I'd like to see in the community that we'd like to present to a candidate and be able to decide, is this what our community wants? Is this what it needs? And so I'm kind of really pleased with having the range be in the middle and being sure that we attract the best candidate.
Councilmember Agnew.
Yeah, I like all the work that you've done. It looks very good. I think the ranges are fair. I was a little curious. You said you tried to stay on the I-90 corridor and yet Issaquah was out there. I think that's a little farther off, but it's a growing community also. So I like what you've done.
Yeah. I actually, what I meant was the I-5 corridor. And I point this out, Issaquah is a little off. This is a discussion we have with the unions all the time. But I like to remind them that Bothell isn't exactly on the I-5 corridor either.
You're absolutely right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, 405 is really like just a connector to I-5, right? I mean, there's another 405 down in California. So like, technically speaking, could you make the argument that 405 is I-5 for this reason?
You will notice in that bullet point, I used the word generally.
All right. Yeah, I think it was a great presentation. I think, you know, this kind of methodology and you know, has served us well for our recent hires. I think we've been very successful with the new staff that we've added to the ELT. So I think, you know, it's something to, you know, continue on with this methodology. I think, you know, all the points that you laid out are very valid, and I agree with them. So I wholeheartedly agree with the recommendation. So I think that gives you the direction that you need for this topic. So if you'd like, so I think that wraps that up, and we can move on to the next one.
Okay.
All right, so we have AB 21-032, discussion of and direction of regarding the selection of an executive search firm to recruit the next city manager. And we're back to Matthew Pruitt.
Okay. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about the process we used to come up with some preferred executive search firms, the options we considered, the criteria we used, the firms we selected, and there are a couple that we felt arose to the top, and we'll get into that a little bit. Their approach, which we thought is really important. There's a difference in the approach between the two firms that we want to go over with you and discuss with you. We're going to show you some job brochure examples from those two firms, and then discuss your options with you. So this essentially was our process. We developed criteria and met with you on February 9th, where we went over that criteria. You provided some additional criteria and emphasized the criteria that you thought was the most important. And we utilized that throughout the discussion with various firms. We identified firms with regional experience. Primarily, I looked at job announcements over the past, I don't know, few years. And if I saw a firm that was attached to a job within our area, they generally were included in the process and considered. We did individual firm interviews. I conducted those. The topics of the discussion were the criteria that you brought up in the previous council meeting. I met with each firm for approximately 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the firm. We went out and got recommendations from other cities. I interviewed 10 HR directors within our region from cities about our size and asked them about their experience with executive search firms and got some good feedback. And then we had an ELT discussion last week, and we spent 45 minutes or so going over everything that I had done up to this point, and came to the conclusion to recommend the two options that we're recommending to you tonight. So all in all, we looked at 7 different firms, and this is them. These firms are nationwide. There are East Coast firms, West Coast firms, Washington State firms on this list, and these primarily was the group that we looked at and considered in the process. We've talked about this before. This is the evaluation criteria we used: experience and knowledge, but with specifically Bothell and then in our region as well. We looked at the city manager hiring track record. We looked at firms' ability to create a process that was fair, equitable, and inclusive. We wanted to know about their approach to feedback and discuss that with each of them. You added the criteria that if we could hire a BIPOC owned or operated firm, that would be something you would be interested in. We also talked about recommendations from other cities and then cost. The bolded criteria on this slide are the criteria that you specifically emphasized in the February 9th meeting. And I tried my best to weigh these items higher when looking into the firms that I looked into. I will say that no firm met all of the criteria, and some had different strengths and weaknesses in areas. So when you even see the top 2 recommendations, you'll say, well, what about this? That was just the case. Not one of them were perfect in all of these areas with all 7 firms. So the first group that we thought rose to the top was the Novak Consulting Group. They're a firm that was based in Ohio, that is based in Ohio. They started out as a small boutique executive search firm that was owned and operated primarily by women, which was a big deal at the time. The recruiter that works for Novak that I met with and who would be primarily who I work with is from Portland, Oregon, is based in Portland, Oregon. Novak Consulting is part of Retellus, which is a nationwide consulting company. They're basically a subsidiary of that company. The recruiter that I referred to is formerly of Waldron HR, which was based in Seattle. And I think that is relevant because Waldron HR for the longest time was one of the very few local government recruiting firms in Washington State. They no longer do local government recruiting for reasons I don't understand. But that experience comes with Novak. They have extensive experience recruiting city managers nationwide in the Pacific Northwest. What I found most interesting about that is they were part of the city of Shoreline recruitment process for their city manager, who's been there for, I believe, the last 8 to 10 years. As you know, based upon the last presentation, Shoreline is one of our economic comparables. It's a very comparable city when you look at Bothell. So I thought that was interesting. They're currently doing city manager recruitments in Beaverton, Oregon, Boulder, Colorado, and Gresham, Oregon, which I thought was interesting because they're all sort of suburbs of larger municipalities that have similar problems to what Bothell is facing. We talked about, when I met with this firm, the use of surveys in current processes, and the recruiter showed me specifically a survey that they used in Gresham, Oregon. They have a very broad public feedback approach. And I would note that because that is a difference between the 2 firms in the sense of they are willing to have within their process an approach where anybody in the city can offer feedback as part of the city manager selection process. Diversity and inclusion is definitely a priority for the Novak Consulting Group. We've discussed specific recruitments of minority candidates, and we specifically discussed a placement they recently made of a Black city administrator in Washington State. The cost for them to coordinate this process for us and work with us is about $27,500. The second firm that we thought rose to the top was a firm called Bridge Group LLC. They are a minority-owned firm based out of Tucson, Arizona. The recruiter is also a vice president and works closely with Mercer Group, which is a nationwide consulting company that also, by chance, does executive recruitments. The recruiter has past experience as a city manager and a department head, and emphasized it a lot when I talked to them, that they had been in similar situations that we are in and kind of understand the challenges of doing these types of recruitments and from the perspective of staff and maybe in the council as well. They are a smaller firm. I think most of the work that is done by this firm will be done by one individual with maybe a little assistance, but primarily the recruiter owns and operates and does the work for this firm. The recruiter has placed many executive positions at the city of Bellevue and comes highly recommended from Bellevue. They have the approach with this firm, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about their process as compared to Novak Group. They like to focus on community stakeholders for their public feedback processes. So Bridge Group feels strongly that the best way to engage the public in recruitment process is to pick community stakeholders, have a narrow group where we know we will get good information from, and less on the broad public feedback sort of approach. The recruiter spoke confidently of ability to recruit a diverse applicant pool and spoke of strong connections in the field and sort of the need to, and if you're going to recruit a diverse applicant pool, you need to do more than just post a job on a website. And you really need to drill down and talk to people. Both firms really kind of emphasize that point, which I think is correct. And Bridge Group, if we were to hire them for their services, would cost approximately $35,000. So this slide, I'm going to get into a little more detail because it's really the primary difference between these two firms. And that is the process. And the ELT found that this was an interesting discussion and something we wanted to share with you and see if you had any insights or thoughts about it. So I'm going to explain this slide because there's kind of a lot going on here. But the first thing you see is the blue boxes. That is the process of Bridge Group LLC. And then the green boxes, which is primarily the process of the Novak Consulting Group. And so you can see from the top how they're going to start, and then what happens at the end. The boxes that are kind of outlined in black. The reason I did that is those are the ones where there's some specific differences in the approach of the two firms. And then I also showed you with some arrows where are the parts in the process, because you were interested in this the last time we spoke, where we will be able to insert public feedback into the actual process and go out and get feedback from the public. Bridge Group, they're going to conduct a survey of the council, staff, and community stakeholders to develop expectations. This firm has a philosophy of what they believe is the best way to develop expectations for the next city manager. And that survey provides them the data, in their opinion, to do that. They then use that data to develop a touchpoint survey for candidates based on data provided. So as part of the recruitment process and the feedback that they received in their initial survey, candidates have to fill out a survey of their own. So it's very targeted to the expectations that we outlined. A candidate profile is developed and the job is announced. It's put on websites. The recruiter goes and contacts people they know. They reach out to various professional groups. They then have a Dropbox used to share applicant information in real time and provide feedback to the recruiter. This is a really different approach than most executive firms. So instead of there's a 5-week recruitment process, we will know who applied for the job in real time. And the firm believes that the importance of this is that they can get feedback on candidates in real time. And they find that useful. Finalists are chosen by council and staff. I would expect there to be anywhere between 3 to 6 finalists that we would interview. And then the processes at the end are very similar between the two firms. There's interviews, there's a potential for public feedback through open houses or different ways to get the public involved. A selection is made, we do background checks, we conduct contract negotiations, the new city manager starts. So the Novak Consulting Group, their approach is a little more traditional than executive search firms. So basically that recruiter will meet with us personally. She will meet with the council, with staff, with other members of the community, if that's something we want them to do. And they will basically interview us, and based upon that information, develop what the candidate profile. Another process they use is they can use a survey. If we want to do this, where we will basically for a time put a survey out to the public, and any member of this, any resident of the city can respond to that survey and provide the council feedback on what they think is important in the next city manager. Candidate profile is developed and the job is announced. That's pretty much similar to what is going to go on with either firm. And then after the recruitment period, the consultant conducts interviews and develops a semifinalist list. So they take all the information they've got from us, all the information from the public, and they look at the candidate pool and they conduct interviews based upon what they know of Bothell and what we've told them. And then they're going to bring us a list of 15 to 20 semifinalists, give or take. And then we review that, staff, council, the consultant review that semifinalist list, and we're going to pare that down and pick who the finalists are, who are the 3 to 6 people that we want to interview for the city manager position. And then the end of the process is the same. There'll be interviews. Both firms talked about open houses and the problems about doing that in COVID-19 and the ability to use Zoom to do that, where the public can meet the finalists for the city manager position. And then there's obviously an interview with the council, potentially an interview with staff, a background check, contract negotiations. The person eventually comes on board. And so that's the 2 different processes. And we thought, because they're sort of unique from one another, that it was something that we wanted to present to you. This is an example of a job brochure that you would see from Novak. It's actually much larger than this. This is just an example. These documents are usually 4 to 5 pages. You can see it's a way to showcase the city to potential job candidates. I would say that the most important part of these brochures, if they're done right, is the text, because that tells a candidate if they're going to be a fit or not, and if they should apply or not, based upon information that we've provided to the firm. And so this is an example of a Novak consulting brochure that they made for recruitment they are currently doing in Beaverton, Oregon. And this is an example of a brochure that the recruiter from Bridge Group created for the city of Bellevue for their fire chief position. Same sort of kind of philosophy of developing a brochure that showcases the city and provides information about the position. So your options are, number 1, to choose one of the 2 firms and direct staff and negotiate a contract for executive search firm services. The amount of this contract is not of such that we need council approval to sign that contract. Number 2, you can say, great job, Matt, but we don't like your options and we'd like to look at more. You can certainly do that. You can also conduct interviews of the 2 firms or more if you wanted to. That's not the option you chose on February 9th. It would certainly add some time to the process, but if that's something you felt like you needed to do in order to make a decision, we could absolutely do that. Our recommendation based on our February 9th discussion is basically you direct us to negotiate a contract with your preferred executive search firm out of the 2 options that we presented to you. And I'm going to stop sharing this so we can talk.
Once again, Matt, great presentation. Anyone have questions? Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Well, I'm sitting here playing a scenario in my head, and thank you, Matt, for the calling. You did give us 2 very capable choices, and neither are really cookie cutters of each other. So thank you for that. In the contract, do you stipulate the terms of winnowing it down to one candidate that we interview, or do you put caveats that it doesn't, what happens if that candidate that we narrow down to doesn't work? Do we then need to pay this firm more money while or are we?
No.
Good.
I didn't have that conversation specifically with Bridge Group, but Novak, as most executive search firms, if there isn't a process that produces a candidate, or if your candidate leaves probably within the first 12 months, they basically do the process. They basically, for the amount that you pay, you basically have them until they've completed the process, and you have a city manager. And so that would definitely be something we negotiated in the contract. I did discuss that specifically with Novak, and haven't done that with the Bridge Group firm yet, but would absolutely do that if that were the preferred option.
Okay, well, thank you. Mayor, is this where we weigh in on what we're thinking about, or do you want to just do questions first?
Let's do questions.
Okay, I'll yield the floor.
Councilmember Thompson.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, Matt, but do you have a direction you lean? Is there a preference you have? Are you bringing us to because you feel the need to bring us to so we can make the choice? Or like, is there one that you're like, I really kind of like this direction?
So I was hoping that would be I figured that question was going to come, but I was kind of hoping it would be the fourth or fifth question. And the reason for that is because the ELT felt strongly that we wanted you to look at these two different processes. And if you had a preference for one process or the other, to sort of tell us that, because it's important if you have opinions about that we know that, and that would probably dictate which firm we would choose. If I had to lean one way, I would lead with Novak Consulting Group, and Aaron knows that I would answer that question, and the reason I feel that way, I just simply feel like there's more bang for your buck with the Novak Consulting Group. They're a little bit larger. They're going to have more resources in house. I think we'll get a little more work from them. And in general, there'll be less gaps for staff to fill in. And I think if we're going to spend money on this, having fewer gaps to fill in is a good thing. Number two, I think their city manager experience is a little better. I really like the Shoreline work. Shoreline is really comparable to us. And I really like that it's so close to us as well. I also really like the recruitments they're doing in Boulder and Gresham and Beaverton at the same time that they would be doing ours, because there'll be candidates for those positions that will also could be interested in Bothell, and I think that's relevant. And then just overall, their presentation style, their use of online tools, I think is modern, and they will present the city in a way that kind of reflects how we want it to be reflected. And so I do lean with them, but I both think they're talented firms. I really enjoyed the conversations with both recruiters a lot, but I would lean to Novak.
Okay. There were a couple things that I really liked about Bridge too. Most notably, I was interested in that survey that they created and sent out. And do we get responses to those in real time? Is that what it is in the app, or is that part of the application, or how exactly does that work? So
he uses Dropbox, and basically, so we've kind of had some discussion internally about this a little bit, like what could we do with that? So what he would do is that myself, maybe a couple other staff members would have access to that Dropbox, and he would put information in there, and we could in real time look at those applications and provide him feedback. But then at council meetings, if we wanted to, we could have executive sessions to discuss qualifications of potential job applicants and discuss the applicants as we were going through the process. I I don't know how big of a benefit it is to do it that way. The things that I find interesting about it is that it really kind of cuts down on the time to make a short list at the end. So there's that benefit to it. And there's more input from us to help determine the sort of group of people, rather than hearing primarily from the consultant. But if that was a concern, we could work that out with either firm. If that makes sense.
I mean, if that's a concern of yours and you think it would be a benefit for us to be able to speak into that kind of short list, like, then I would encourage you to bring that up with them as well.
I'm really fine with either process.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Matt, for the information. I just had a couple questions. There was you had mentioned that one of the companies was minority owned. And can you tell me the type of minority owned company that is? And then also there was a placement locally in Washington. Can you tell me what city that placement was?
The criteria given to me by Councilmember Thompson was minority owner operated. They're both owned or operated. Bridge Group is minority owned. It's owned. The recruiter and owner is an African American who's been in city management before. That firm primarily does not do city manager positions. The positions they're doing for the city of Bellevue are more or less executive positions: deputy city manager, fire chief, department heads, positions like that. Novak, that they discussed a placement they recently made in I believe Camas, Washington, which is down south near Vancouver, where they placed a Black city administrator. I will tell you, diversity in the city management field is a tough issue, and both firms are going to tell you that. But they both expressed confidence that they would be able to produce applicant pools that had a broad range of backgrounds within them. They didn't promise that, but they felt confident they would be able to do that. I'm not sure I answered your question completely, Councilmember McNeil.
You actually did answer my question, Matt, and thank you for that.
Okay. Oh, the one thing I would add to that is Novak is not what I would say BIPOC owned, but that they're a subsidiary of the Retellus, which is an organization that does have BIPOC members of its board and executive structure. And so I felt they met the criteria that was given to me at the previous council meeting of owned or operated, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. So how long has the city manager been with Camas?
Not long. It was a recent.
Just recent, okay. And then there's two things that you mentioned about the differences. One of them was that Novak seems to communicate with the community in a broad group, and Bridge does more of a narrow group.
Yep.
So I think that's something I really think we should have an opportunity to think about. I'm sure that each of them could do either way if we did that.
I think either of them would do it either way. Although anytime you want them to go outside of their process, what they're probably going to tell you is it's going to be more money.
Oh,
that makes sense. But,
that makes sense. Yes.
But yes, I think either of them would probably do what we asked them.
Okay.
But they would want to negotiate that.
And then you might have referenced this. I kind of lost a little bit of track when you talked about the Dropbox, but in under Novak, you said the consultant will meet with executives and staff and conduct a survey of the public or use other tools to gather feedback. So what other tools are you referring to?
So there's a variety of things you could do. you could, so I think what we're talking about, Councilmember McCall, if I'm mistaken, you need to correct me, but what you're talking about is sort of the beginning of the process. So we're kind of determining who we want to be the next city manager and sort of putting that profile. So one way outside of doing, so Bridge Group has a survey that they send to community stakeholders. So basically a narrower group of the public that's determined by the council, where Novak has a process and they've used tools to basically expand that survey community wide, and anybody can participate in it. But the other tools would be, you could interview boards and commissions, which are members of the public. You could have, you could do a larger survey, a broader survey, but then have a time for people to come give public comment on what they think the next city manager could do at a city council meeting or to arrange special meeting. You could have specific focus groups where you want the recruiter to go interview specific focus groups. There's a number, and then there's probably a hybrid of all those options.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. And let's see. I guess, in listening to you talk about Novak and what their past experience has been, I feel they're a little bit stronger as a candidate to do this. So thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
Yeah.
Sound, I can't hear you. Doesn't look like you're muted, but.
Oh. Hello?
There you go.
Okay. I think they're both strong candidates. I like the fact that Novak is running and trying to put in city managers. And they've done the city manager at Shoreline. They're doing the city manager at Beaverton. They're doing the city manager in the Northwest here. And that would be my preference.
All right, looks like we're switching over to feedback now. Deputy Mayor Zorns, if you want to.
I get to weigh in. Yep. Well, I thought I had my mind made up, and then Matt just blew it up so, with some very valid points. So I appreciate that. I was leaning to the Bridge Group because it's the owner versus an employee. That would be that's our contact person. And he seemed familiar with the East Side. He understands Arch and their fire department. So he kind of knows Bothell issues. And he's a former city manager, so he knows the job. And I liked, I can appreciate he did not pull the public out of that piece because that is part of the process. I was looking for that, but he seems to try to find a way to streamline and be comprehensive in the process. So I appreciated that. And then you brought up some other good points with Novak. So you did your job well again, Matt. I
just want to reiterate, myself and the executive leadership team are fine with whomever you choose out of these two.
Well, you also brought up a good point. I think the tipping point for me was when you were talking about Novak and that we could also bring boards and commissions in and have them weigh in. I really would like to have their voice as part of how we choose the city manager. And I don't know if Bridge Group would be comfortable adding another group of voices, but I do like that piece that you mentioned about Novak. So I'm good with whatever council leans. Both are a win-win for me.
Councilmember McNeil, I'm not sure if your hand is still up or if that's a fresh hand.
Thank you, Mayor. Good for looking. No, my hand was left up.
All right. well, I guess we need feedback from Councilmember Thompson or Councilmember McNeil. Councilmember Thompson. Oh, just saw the blue hand afterwards.
This is a tough choice for me. There's a reason that I asked Matt what his preference was. It's because I wasn't leaning a strong direction or another. Because I don't see an enormous, I mean, there are differences between the process. I don't necessarily see one as superior to the other. Like, I don't have a preference between the two particularly. I can see pros and cons for both. I like, in some senses, hiring the smaller company, but I also like, in other senses, knowing that the larger company has more resources and more pull. I think the executive city manager experience weighs really heavy with me. Like, somebody that's proven that they can do that specific role successfully is a big deal. And if I was going to say if I were forced to choose, but I kind of am. So, I mean, I'd probably go Novak, like, you know, but it's not like a 90-10. It's like a 55-45. I will give that direction, but worrying that I'm not making the right call in the back of my head. So that is what I think.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. I just echo the comments about experience, city manager role. This is a very, very, very important decision that we as a body need to make in hiring a next city manager. It's critically important that we allow the community into the process so that we're open, transparent throughout this hiring process. And, you know, Matt and his team for all the work they've done to bring these two candidates to us, I think is critical. The fact that, you know, we reached out and we looked for that diversity piece is amazing. But at the end of the day, the decision is much larger than us. It is a representation of our entire community. And so just ensuring our leadership group, our community, our boards and commissions all can kind of weigh in on this process, and that we're open and transparent with the process, I think is the biggest piece. So I too would lean towards Novak.
So I think I'll be the unanimous voice on here that I think the differentiator for me was really the broader public feedback, just the ability for anyone to be able to provide that feedback, the input. Because I think a lot of the typical community voices that might have been selected with Bridge, I think they'll have avenues to still have their input heard either through other city council members or just other avenues. But I think it would be helpful and a little bit of a change of pace for just anybody being able to have that feedback in there. So I think that was the deciding factor for me. Matt.
So what I generally hear is a slight preference towards one, but really it's a close call. Would it be all right to ask? Lots of things can happen when you start discussing things with people in contract negotiations. You can learn new things. If it didn't work out with one or the other, would you be fine with us approaching the other one? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, I think you did an excellent job bringing forth two excellent candidates here. So I think everyone on council was saying that it was a very close decision with just small little pieces here and there that pushed people over to one side or the other. But if anyone wants to weigh in, I'll allow some quick comments. So Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. And I was just very impressed with your presentation of Novak. And I thought they were very, very close in my kind of thoughts, but I really like the fact that they have been involved with many cities that we are familiar with and comparable to. So, but again, I'm going to say that if you find when you present to Novak that it just doesn't meet up to what you think, then, I think you're the best judge in the end of the day.
Okay. Councilmember McNeil.
Yes, I would agree with that as well. Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with that as well. However, if there is going to be a change, I would like to at least have the opportunity to know or be notified that there is something did not work out with Novak.
Absolutely. Heard.
All right. Okay. Sounds like you have your direction.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for this discussion.
No, excellent discussion on both topics. Thank you very much for giving us the information we needed.
Everyone have a good night.
All right, that brings us to our final item, council conversations. Councilmember McNeil, I see a hand. Or not?
Negative. That was a hand left up. You're on point tonight. I love it.
I'm looking over there. Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Of course, I would have something to say. Hopefully you'll be brief. One thing that I wanted to toss out, I don't know if you remember, we had, because we've talked about it as a council before, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago during public testimony, Manny Campolo was giving us an update for parks, and it was during the 3-minute public testimony. And he had some points that he was sharing with us that from the Parks Department that I wanted to hear all of his points, and him doing that during the public testimony just doesn't seem like a right venue for us to get updates. And we've talked about that before from council of getting regular check-ins from different boards and commission chairs. So I would like us to revisit that here in 2021 of inviting department head, or not department heads. Well, yes, of course, department heads, but the boards and commission heads to just come and tell us what they're working on and things that they're thinking about and what they would like from us. So any rate, I just wanted to put that on the table because I think it kind of has gotten lost in the shuffle. And then there is a growing, this is not a point of action, but I just wanted to mention that there is a growing conversation of pea patches in the community. And I know that when we were talking about cluster housing, we were talking about, would that be a permitted use in cluster housing for pea patches? So my little favor to ask of you guys is when you hear context for pea patches, could we just start kind of inventorying what your observations and thoughts, down the road you saw, you observed, and just noodle that for a while. It's a little late in the game to get a growing season going for 2021 because I think planting is in the next 4 or 5 weeks. But it would be a great project if we could start looking for ways to have community pea patches around the area. And that's all I wanted to bring to the table.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. And I just want to do briefly welcome the 2 new businesses that came to Bothell. Bristle and Strand is the salon on Bothell Way in the building next to Banner Bank. And there is a French bakery and that's right next door to them that is just opened as well. So please go in and talk to them. They're very excited to be here. And I just wanted to, I haven't tasted the French bakery yet, but I'm going. And then I also had asked our interim city manager if we could look at or talk about having diversity and equity education for the council members. So I want you to think about that and see. I really think it's important because I believe you don't know what you don't know. And so I think it's important for us as a council to have some input, education on diversity and equity. And then the last one I want to do is that I received, as you well did, many emails from different people in the community supporting our Bothell Police Department and the officers' response when they were in need. And so I just wanted to recognize that we had some wonderful comments about our police officers. And I did have one more, and that was, oh yes, I just want you to be aware, that you probably are, that there is a petition going around to keep Main Street closed, and they have about 3,000 to 4,000 signatures at this point. So more to come.
Councilmember McNeil.
You got me that time, Mayor. Councilmember McAuliffe, thank you for your suggestion on the education piece of diversity and equity. I think it's anything that we can do to educate ourselves on, that would be amazing. So thank you for that. And I definitely would be very interested in myself attending that as well. I had a couple questions on the, Mr. Mayor, maybe pointing towards you on discussions you've had with Representative Del Benny, maybe for any benefits to our city for funding that we might see, or anything that we can do to help get some of those dollars brought back into our community. So you don't need to necessarily answer that now, but maybe just let us know as a council sometime when you're going to give an update, and let us know how we can help on that. Maybe the legislative meeting that you had, or the group had with our representatives in the first, our senator and 2 representatives, kind of let us know, how we can help with that as well, or things that we need to do, or maybe let us know some of the conversations you had a little bit more in depth. And then lastly, I just wanted to ask Councilmember McAuliffe and let her know our thoughts and prayers are with her on her son-in-law, and let her know that that my family to your family, we're caring deeply for you guys and wishing you a speedy recovery.
Thank you.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to echo Councilmember McNeil's best wishes to Councilmember McAuliffe. I'm sorry for what your family's going through, and I hope for healing. And I also want to echo your comments on DEI training. I think that would be a really good idea for this body. So thank you for bringing that up.
Councilmember Agnew.
I love the comment about the DEI training, and I think we have somebody near and dear to us that's kind of on this council that's doing some of that. If I'm not mistaken, Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you for bringing it up, Councilmember.
Was that hand still raised up?
No, Mr. Mayor, I keep forgetting.
So I'll just speak real quick. So I haven't had a chance to speak with a Rep. Del Benny. I've just left voicemail or input into our support for direct funding for cities and municipalities out of the federal level. So I know we've been trying to get a meeting scheduled, but that one hasn't happened quite yet. But I will keep us informed on what happens out of that when it does. And I think a DEI training opportunity for the council would be a great idea as well. Because I think a lot of us on council just are relatively young on council, and there's lots of opportunities for training for council on many issues, but I think DEI is a very present and current need, so I think that'd be a great opportunity for us. Councilmember McNeil?
Yeah, and Councilmember Agnew brought up, I've been elected to be on the new cabinet for equity and diversity for SCA. The president of the SCA board has elected to have me put on there. I was voted in as a member of that cabinet. It's an honor to be part of that cabinet as we do work across the region on behalf of 38 cities, over 1 million people. I'm so encouraged that Bothell has a seat at the table with that, and I still look forward to bringing back a lot of the work that we're doing into Bothell and helping not only our city but also our community, city, the council as well. So important work. It's so amazing to have been included in that group. There's a strong leadership group, across this region that's trying to do great work. And I'm just so hopeful that our community can see that we are ensuring that our voice is at the table when we have these important conversations. And I look forward to bringing back information to our council in these conversations and committee updates to let everybody know what we, the city of Bothell, the city council, and staff at city are doing to ensure a welcoming community.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. And I do want to thank those who mentioned that my son-in-law did have a skiing accident, and fortunately he was very, very lucky. What happened could have been much worse. So thank you for your thoughts. And then I also wanted to tell you that I'm attempting, and I think I'm going to be a part of it, the Bothell Kenmore Chamber of Commerce has a diversity and equity committee, and I have asked to be appointed to that, so I could work with them also on how they are going to present their businesses to be welcoming, and how they can also encourage other businesses to come into our city that have that diversity. So just a little update on that. I'll let you know as I meet with them this month.
Well, yeah, I certainly hope for a speedy recovery for your son-in-law as well. So thankfully, you're sounding like it's not terribly serious, but any injury is always serious. So. All right, looks like we are done conversing. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. So thank you everyone tonight for another great city council meeting. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next week for boards and commissions.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, everyone.